talk to you about leadership in uncertain times. So, how many of you are familiar with the term VUCA? Sure. Raise your hand really high. So, most of you know what it is. So, how many of you know what is the origin? Where did this term come from actually? The term came from US Army. And, today it has become synonymous with business. When the army is deployed for action, you can describe the battlefield in terms of broadly four things. Sometimes it's complex, sometimes it's ambiguous, sometimes it's volatile, and sometimes it's uncertain. But what if it is all of that at the same time? So what is complex? A complex situation is one where the situation has many interconnected parts and variables. Some information is available or can be predicted, but volume or nature of it can be overwhelming to process. So much of data, very short time to take a decision, so much of data that you'll be just paralyzed with information. The second element is ambiguity, which is causal relationship, cause-effect relationship are completely unclear. What is causing what? No precedents exist, and it is a situation where it's called unknown unknowns. You don't know what you don't know. How do you take a decision in a time like that? Situation like that. And then there is uncertainty, where despite a lack of information, the event's basic cause and effect are known. And then you have volatile situation, where the challenge is unexpected or unstable and may be of unknown duration, but not necessarily hard to understand. Knowledge about it is often available. So, example of volatility is, let us say that there's a natural disaster and it has got an impact immediately on pricing of products and services. There's a scarcity of products and services. So you broadly know what will happen. Now, if you look at complexity, for example, the idea of complexity, now, a good example of that would be black money. So, yes, you can unearth all the black money you want, right? But the sheer information available is so much, though people talk about non-availability. But frankly, you could be processing so many tons of information that you will actually reach nowhere. So what do you do in a situation like that? You basically battle complexity with simplicity. You simplify things. If you look at an example of ambiguity, an ambiguous situation, the best example of that is probably the Bay of Pig disaster, where people landed up in a battlefield completely unaware about what they were getting into. So there are different examples, and we can keep talking about those. But if you pay attention to your own life personally and your own corporation or your own startup, you'll basically have to deal with situations which are complex, volatile, ambiguous, and uncertain, but many times all the four will present themselves together. And today we should talk about the role of leadership in times of difficulty, in times of VUCA. What do these terms mean? First of all, there's a Chinese proverb that says, "May you live in interesting times." It's supposedly a blessing, but actually it is meant to be a curse. Okay. So this is in the volatile, complex, ambiguous, and uncertain world is actually interesting times. So that's why, this is interesting. May you live in interesting times. And I think this curse or this blessing has become very true today. These are interesting times in India and outside India. So what happens in interesting times? Paul Kinsinger, a leading educationist, says that we are moving from a world of problems to a world of dilemmas. It's easier to deal with problems than to deal with dilemmas. If you have a problem, you have a solution. But what if there are two solutions? And now you have to choose, and every choice brings consequences. Many problems are problems of leadership problems, are problems of choices. Which one should you choose? Today, more than ever before, the idea of planning is ceasing to be relevant. So plans are nothing. And Dwight Eisenhower said that planning is everything. The ability to plan is more important than just having a plan and sticking to that plan and executing on that plan. When I started my career, planning was so critical, not just for a corporation, but even at a national level. You talked about 5-year plans. Today, even countries are realizing, corporations are realizing that you can't even have an annual plan. But it doesn't mean that you abandon planning. Planning has to be taken to the next higher level. Plan gave us certain stability, comfort, some amount of sleep time, but that's gone now. Bismarck's famous statement that in a situation like this, we cannot control current events, but we can float and our job is to steer them. So you can't control. So when you can't control, the thing on which you have control is steering yourself in the mess. Communication becomes very important in difficult times, but management is designed to think that communication has already taken place. So that's what George Bernard Shaw talks about, this grand illusion. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has already taken place. After 9/11, I came across this statement that we live in times where there is a high probability that a low probability thing will happen. There's a very high probability that a low probability thing will happen. So we have to basically deal in situations like this. So how do we deal? Now, I picked up a bunch of examples that I have been inspired by, and I'd like to share some of those today. So this is a great chart, famous chart that Paul Polman of Unilever used. And I call it the chart of vision. So in interesting times, to deal with interesting times, to deal with the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situation that has become permanent now, I think leadership's job number one is to create a vision. Paul Polman, when he took over Unilever, he came out with this very simple chart. And what he said is that by 2020, from a $40 billion corporation, they would become an $80 billion corporation. This was roughly about 10 years back. But here was a challenge. He said, while sales must double, the carbon footprint of Unilever must come back to 2010 levels. So by 2020, you have to double sales, but you have to bring carbon footprint down to 2010 levels. Now imagine you are chairman of Unilever and you make a statement like that. How can you do it? What it in reality leads to is complete reinvention of every single aspect of Unilever. It means closing down factories. It means dropping product lines. It means a new acquisition strategy. It means sacking a few people on the top who do not understand what sustainability is all about. It is also about R&D, so that you think about a shampoo that does not require water. So the job of a leader is to create a vision, a hairy, monstrous goal. When Paul Polman took over, Unilever was a sleepy company of about 100,000 people who were no longer inspired by making carbolic soap. And then comes this man and says, we'll double our sales and half our carbon footprint. And the next thing that happens is gets invited by United Nations to talk about this slide. And the next thing that happens is media presents him as the warrior of the planet. And next thing that happens is every Unilever employee goes around with a badge of honor that I'm not just making soap and shampoo and ice cream here, I'm actually a warrior for the planet. The job of a leader is to create a vision, see a future that other people don't see. And the next job is to then create a vision community. Paul Polman was able to create a vision community. Because a vision community then carries forward a shared vision. So in uncertain times like never before, the leadership capacity to create vision is very important. To see what other people are not seeing, and then saying that there is hope. Only when you have vision that you will be able to say there is hope, things will be all right. Anybody who does not recognize these two faces, please raise your, does not recognize these two faces, please raise your hand. Okay, so many people don't. So these two gentlemen are Sundarajan Bangaru Swami and Sundararajan, G.B. Sundararajan. How many people do not know who these two names, what these two names mean? Please raise your hand. I need to see some interactivity here. Very good. Excellent. Yeah. So these are the founders of Suguna Chicken. And this year Suguna Chicken is pretty close to 6,000 crores in turnover. Now, Suguna Chicken, these two brothers, they actually were in a tiny village near Udmalpet in Coimbatore, near Coimbatore. Udmalpet, further away, and born to school teacher parents. When the elder brother was passing his matriculation, the parents and wanted to study further, parents dissuaded and said, "You will be another low-paid teacher like us. Why don't you tend to the land, that small land that we have?" So brother worked really hard. 18-year-old guy worked really hard and grew excellent vegetables. But the problem is, if you are further away from Udmalpet and you create really a fantastic farm and grow fantastic vegetable, then you are doomed. Because who's going to buy that? Where's the supply chain? So this guy actually drove the family into debt. A time came when he had to be pulled out and sent off to work as a salesman in Hyderabad. And the younger brother then, spent a little time in college, got distraught, came back, and was visiting a cousin sister who was raising chicken and saw one-day-old chicks. And something happened to him. He brought home 100 of those, not even knowing where to keep, called the elder brother back. And then that's how the story of Suguna Chicken started. So they started raising chicken. Once they started raising chicken, then they needed chicken feed, so they would buy feed from Mysore Feed, a company called Mysore Feed. And along the way they said, you know what, why are we just buying feed and feeding our chicken? Let's sell feed to fellow farmers. They started doing that. Till one day, a fellow farmer complained to Mysore Feed that these two brothers are adulterating feed. So Mysore Feed actually sent a quality inspector, and they were very offended, very upset. And they stopped using Mysore Feed. And secondly, they got so angry, they said, we'll make our own feed. So Suguna Chicken suddenly became not just a chicken company, but started, making feed. But they saw limit to growth. And in that limit to growth, the problem was space. Where would you make chicken coops? And that is where the two brothers said that let's do one thing. Let's give one-day-old chicks to farmers, and every farmer has space, every farmer has spare time, and then we give them the medicines and the feed and go pick up the chicken after 45 days. So farmer has got all the insurance the farmer needs, gets the inputs, gets the medicines, the chicken feed, everything in between, and then an assured return on that investment. So Suguna Chicken today, does not raise a single chicken. More than 18,000 farmers raise their chicken. So it's a chickenless chicken company actually. Now that's strategy to get farmers in Tamil Nadu, and today they're all over India, and they've gone into Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So it's a clear story of strategy. You need a strategy. But I'll also argue that you need to be angry. Leaders must be angry. Anger is you need self-respect. Many times you said, don't be angry. No, you need to be in touch with your feelings. They felt offended. Otherwise, they'd still be, buying Mysore feed and selling to their, friends and family. So you need a strategy. But more than strategy, because of VUCA world, strategy necessarily is a headquartered focused idea. Today, the leader's job is to build strategic capability down the line. Strategy is no longer a conventional leadership exercise. More than being strategists or being strategic ourselves, we need to be able to tell people, our people down the line, how to think strategically. And because it is VUCA world, and there's a high probability that a low probability thing will happen, when a low probability thing actually happens, more than finding a solution to that, we need to find sense in that. So leaders must be sense makers. We get seized with the need to explain something, explain something away and give a solution. No, in today's world, we require leaders who will enable strategic capability, capacity building. And secondly, when disaster happens, things don't go right, things go wrong, to make sense of things, to help people to make sense. Because if you help people to make sense, they will figure things out. This is a company I admire. I deeply admire, because it's a bold company. It's fashionable to actually, find out what's wrong with this company and build our own armchair analysis of it. But among the boldest companies that the country has produced, this is one such company. And just look at this one aspect of boldness. In 2000, they had 5,389 employees. 2003, that number was 3 times higher. In 2005, almost 19,000. 2007, in 2 years' time, 4 times. And then if you look today, that number is 2 lakh employees. There are lots of stories in this. One important story is in 2000, there are 5,300 employees. If you are CEO of Infosys and you want to have 15,000 employees in 2003, do you think it can happen randomly? I'll argue it cannot be random. From 2000, if you randomly become 15,000 in a matter of 3 years, you'll just break apart. All growth, and that's why cancer is a growth, is inherently destructive. Because growth is a struggle between centripetal forces and centrifugal forces. One pulls away from the center, the other wants to pull back. So most companies actually fail not because of external reasons, because of this tussle between centripetal and centrifugal forces. So growth is inherently destructive unless it's managed. So this was not random growth, this was managed growth. Now you're CEO of Infosys in 2000, so you have a clarity in your mind as to how you will become 3 times bigger, because you are laying the systems and processes well ahead of time. In 2000, while you have planned beautifully, what has happened the next year? What has happened the next year in the world? Something happened, right? Right? WTC happened. The whole world came to an end. Business froze, but Infosys did not freeze. This is not the right time to hire. But look at what the company has done. So it's very counterintuitive. Most people will say, let's just freeze, let's not go ahead with what we have thought about, because the world has come to an end. 9/11, which was life-changing for every business, every businessman in the world. And the company moved on. So even in difficult times, we have to be bold. More difficult the time, bolder must be our capacity to take decisions. This advertisement you probably have forgotten or probably have never seen. This advertisement came from Deccan Aviation. This is the forerunner of Captain Gopinath's low-cost airline company. Now, he sold off the company, and we all know what happened to the man who bought that company. Okay, But what people do not know is that this business, Captain Gopinath never sold. And this continues to be a profitable business, the helicopter business. But there's a story behind the helicopter business. Those of you who would have read Gopi's book would remember that Gopi was an organic farmer after retiring from the army, and he would frequently come to the army club in Bangalore to play squash. And one of the guys he played squash was his buddy in army, whose name is Sam. Gopi is not a pilot. Sam was basically a helicopter pilot. So Sam was out of job. And after a few days, Sam got a job and told Gopi delightedly that he has a job of a courier company branch manager. So Gopi was devastated. He said, look, on one hand, the country requires connectivity, requires more economic progress, requires more connectivity, you need more aviation. And on the other hand, a trained helicopter pilot has to become a courier company manager. So the dream of an aviation company started there. But both were poor fellows. Gopi's father is a school teacher, actually, was a school teacher. So these two guys went to Singapore, and no bank will give you money if you say, I want to get into helicopter business. He went to Singapore, talked to a guy, asked him, who had helicopters and was drinking beer essentially all day, because sometimes people come, hire a helicopter for a film shoot, sometimes they'll come for an aerial survey, but most of the times, most helicopters are on the ground, not off the ground. So he said, we want to hire a helicopter, how much is it? So he said, by hour, so much. He said, no, by week. So he said, so much. He said, no, by month, so much. Then he said, what if we lease this helicopter for a whole year? Would you want to be a piece of that action? And Sam and Gopi, at the end of it, actually flew back with the man's helicopter. Okay? It's true. Now, this wouldn't have happened if they would have checked the price of the helicopter first. Okay? You never, if you want to get into the helicopter business, don't ask for the price of the helicopter. The rest is history. So, this was a great demonstration of creativity. And in difficult times, we have to be creative for two reasons. One is to deal with problems, but more than that, also to seek the opportunities. Indians have too much problem-solving orientation. We love solving problems, while the opportunities can just go by. You need to have creativity. And creativity has a playfulness to it. In that moment, Gopi and Sam were actually like truant school kids. How else can you go and talk to a beer-drinking man on a tarmac and say, okay, so how much will it be per week, per month, and what about per year, and do you want to be part of that game? It requires schoolboyish, style to engage in that kind of conversation, but they did it. Are you good? Okay. So this is Biocon. Biocon was in the enzyme business. And when Biocon was in the enzyme business, Kiran Majumdar-Shaw's number one client was Unilever. And Unilever actually had taken a stake in Biocon. And Kiran didn't want to be an enzyme company. Kiran wanted to be a drug discovery company. And Kiran's dream was one day she wanted to build a cancer drug out of India. So imagine you are young, inexperienced, you're not even in your 30s, and Unilever is your shareholder and your number one customer, and you say, I don't want to be in the enzyme business because I want to do drug discovery. So Unilever gives her a lecture on core competence as a stick to your knitting, search of excellence. And she says, no. Then Unilever says that if you want to distract yourself from this, we will cease to be your buyer, and you know what, we'll pull out of our shareholding. It can be completely devastating for a young entrepreneur. She said, okay, so be it. So she sold off her enzyme business, and that is how Biocon was born, the way you know it today, and she is India's biotech queen. So what is the story here? You need purpose. Why do you need purpose? The Dalai Lama once told me, I'm not dropping names to impress you, I was lucky enough to spend an hour with him to do an interview for Forbes. And I was talking to him, and he said it beautifully. He said, your purpose determines your power. The power is not inside of me. The power is not men, material, money, and information. He says, your purpose determines your power. So by embracing the purpose of being a drug discovery company, it didn't matter to her, and she dumped the enzyme business, rather sold off, and she was unfazed by Unilever's counsel and then threat to her. So we need to have purpose like never before. The idea of purpose is connected to the idea of time. Purpose unfolds itself only when we take a long view of time. Today, because it's a VUCA world, we get intuitively, instinctively focused on the short view of time. We say, oh, everything is here and now. No, purpose is very, very important. So, Cafe Coffee Day. All of us know Siddharth was a coffee bean grower. Coffee estates were closing down, and people were getting out of the coffee estate business. And coffee is a seasonal business. I shouldn't be talking about seasonal crops in Kerala. All of you know that one year is boom and the other year is bust. The year that is boom is bad for you because everybody has boom. And the year you're bust, you don't even meet your cost. Same story of cardamom and rubber and coffee and every other agricultural produce. So what Siddharth said is that instead of haggling with my buyer for a few cents per bag of per sack of coffee bean, let me get into the brew business. And all his advisors said that it's a stupid idea because coffee drinking is dwindling. But Siddharth knew that it is not coffee, it's a boy meet girl business. So go to a small town India, a boy wants to bring a girl in, and boys are very focused. They're idiots, but focused. The focus is for what? The focus is to keep the girl longer. Okay. So the boy will say, have cappuccino. Phenomenal. Okay. After that said, you must try the samosa here. It's really good. This idiot has never eaten it himself. Okay. And I can tell you that Cafe Coffee Day samosa is really bad. I'm telling you. Okay. So the girl will take a little bit of the crispy side, and then she will leave it daintily. And then the fellow will call the waiter and say, hey, get water. Okay, have some water. So we'll try to maximize time with her. And Siddharth figured out that between the bean and the brew, the return on investment is order of magnitude different. And nobody negotiates for a cup of coffee. People negotiate for the bean. And between the cup of coffee, the money he makes more money on the samosa because he doesn't make the samosa. Somebody else makes it. Then he says, no, I don't have space. He says, please keep it and pay me when you sell it. Okay. So he gets it for no price and pays it later. And what money he makes on samosa, he makes more money on the water. So he's able to see adjacency. We have to see what lies next. We are too focused. The other great example of adjacency is Baba Ramdev. Next to yoga, he saw Ayurvedic medicine, better than many Kerala companies did. Okay. And next to Ayurvedic medicine, what is he seeing now? What is he seeing? What? Speak louder, Cosmetics. Okay. What else is he seeing? Toothpaste. What else is he seeing? Jeans. What else is he seeing? Security, sir. Yeah. Only a lady could say everything. You're right. I'll be very surprised if this guy will not get into the fertilizer business. All he has to say to the villagers, to the farmers, that don't buy from multinationals. Don't buy chemical fertilizer. I'll give you organic fertilizer. And if Ramdev says this bag is organic, it is organic, period. Don't laugh, I'm making a serious, statement. And let me tell you that if you're an FMCG chairman today, you will have sleepless nights because of this guy. Because this man is seeing adjacency. By the way, I don't think a lot of Kerala entrepreneurs see adjacency very well. They do extremely well in what they're doing in their own field, particularly the agro brands in Kerala. They have not done as good a job on adjacency as some of these people have done. So in times like this, sometimes we have to use what is called the judo strategy, which is you have to go with your opponent. This famous picture of Putin trying to show off his judo strategy in Japan with a schoolgirl, and you can see what happened to Putin within seconds. Because in typical fights, when somebody is pushing, and that's what Putin is doing here, our tendency is to push back or to hold our ground solidly. In judo, what this girl did is she, as Putin pushed her, she let him push her. And in that moment, one small jerk and this man was on the ground. So you basically take your opponent's forward movement and convert that into a fall. And so it basically let your opponent do what your opponent is doing. So we have to make friends with your enemies. There are times when your friends are really not your friends and your enemies are really not your enemies, particularly if you're close to Delhi. So those of you who have attended Professor Vijay Govindarajan's talks, and I'm sure some of you have done Tuck School, he is very fond of giving the Fosbury flop example. Fosbury flop, which is about jumping backwards, okay, when you do a pole vault or you do a high jump, was actually started by this man called Dick Fosbury. Dick Fosbury was born in 1947. 1968, he won the Olympics, and he's the inventor of this way of jumping. Until he came on this scene, when people would do high jump, they would run straight and either jump over the line or the bar or the string or whatever it is, or sometimes later on they would do what is called a scissor cut, which is try to make a leg movement while you are in the air. And this man could not clear in high school 5 feet. So he was dropped off from athletics. And then he kept trying, and one day he said that instead of running straight towards the finishing line, right at the moment where you are peaking, instead of going straight forward, turn back, and then what happens is the center of gravity changes. The center of gravity actually becomes a point below the wall. And then you're almost like weightless and you can go wherever you want to go. So this is called the famous Fosbury flop. So imagine a guy running full steam towards the goal and then suddenly in midair changes and, looks the other way around. So it was very revolutionary. And in fact, to quote him, he said that it started as a revolution and then became an evolution. The revolution happened in his mind when he said, this is the new way of doing it. And from that point onwards, he started perfecting it. So that's why he talks about evolution. To do this, you need to be mad. You need to be a little mad. And entrepreneurs, chief executives need to be a little mad. Like I told you earlier, you need to be a little angry. You need to be also a little mad. Madness is a good thing. I told you earlier that planning is everything. Plan is not a good idea. So this is a favorite picture of mine, and this is a F-16D plus landing on a Singapore highway. So in India today, we are very fond of landing planes on highways near Delhi. But actually that whole idea came from Singapore way back. Its genesis is way back in 1965. When Singapore became newly independent, the people of Singapore wanted an airline which will be world-class when they could not afford to fly a plane. Then somebody said that, look, to have a world-class airline, you require a world-class airport. That is how they came out with this idea of an aerotropolis, not an airport, an aerotropolis, a small city-state in which all life support systems will be available, whether you need it for 1 hour or 6 hours or 1 day. You can shop there, you can see a doctor there, you can meditate there, you can see go to a butterfly park there, you can visit a museum, and of course you can do any other thing that you want. So it's an aerotropolis, all life support systems are there. But there's a problem. If you're a 60-kilometer nation and you build an aerotropolis called Changi, and one of the runways, because of natural reasons or enemy attack, is disabled, then what happens? Where do you land and take off from? So that is how they came out with this idea that the road connecting to Changi, which got flower pots in the middle, in less than half an hour can be removed to land actually a 747 jet. So the story begins there. So planning is everything. And what is the level of planning? You look at this picture here. This is AVA Operation Gallus 2013. This is long after the avian flu happened. And avian flu is a brilliant example of VUCA. You are in an unknown. You don't know what you are dealing with. What is causing the virus? But more importantly, how long will the virus last? Is it self-limiting? It is not self-limiting. So those of you who have tracked it will remember Singapore was affected by the avian flu. In India, we move from disaster to disaster and we have this control alternate delete built in. So we remove, completely all memories related to the last disaster. But here you see they are doing simulation, because simulation is everything. Because we live in a world where there is a high probability that a low probability thing will happen. Dr. Venkataswamy, Govindappa Venkataswamy, the founder of Aravind Eye Hospital, who braced huge personal adversity. He trained to be came from a small hamlet in Tamil Nadu, trained to be an obstetrician gynecologist because he was affected by seeing a young woman die at childbirth. And from that hamlet became a doctor in Indian Army, 1942. Within a year, he caught a rare form of rheumatoid arthritis. His fingers got twisted beyond recognition. Army discharged him, retrained himself to be an eye doctor, and founded the Aravind Eye Hospital with his little savings as a government doctor, with a 13-bed hospital in his own home. And today, Aravind Eye Hospital is the largest eye hospital in the world. It didn't happen just like that. But one of the things that Dr. V was always saying, that competence is not everything. He would always say, you must have the joy of doing something beautiful. So competence is not everything. We need to have joy that we are doing something beautiful. That is the secret of Aravind Eye Hospital. That they're doing something beautiful by which 70% of the patients don't have to pay. The 30% paying patients are able to pay for the surgery or medical attention of the 70%. The joy of doing something beautiful. This Rudy Giuliani, you are Mr. Giuliani, right? You're not related to him. Okay. So when Rudy Giuliani actually took over as mayor of New York State, it was called the murder capital of the world. It was one of the unsafest places on the planet. More murders, homicides were happening there than any other place. This man calls his police chief and tells the police chief that, look, from tomorrow, remove the panhandlers from the street. Like we have panhandlers, even in Kochi, I find you have panhandlers. People will stop you and beg, or people will clean your windshield, try to sell you something. The police chief was meeting Giuliani, thinking that Giuliani will ask for impossible, and then he would trick Giuliani by asking for more cop cars and more investments. And New York State was nearly, not doing so well economically at that time. You ask for resources, this man can't give. No, this man didn't say any such thing. He says, just get rid of the panhandlers. So he said, easy, 72 hours, the cops removed the panhandlers, and the panhandlers were the last mile of drug delivery. So when you stopped and the guy was cleaning, he said, hey man, do you have coke? And money changed hands, the guy gave money. And the panhandler was also what Alvin Toffler would call a prosumer, producer and consumer. Just consume the drug that he was selling. So when you consume drugs, you lose sense. So the same panhandler runs out of money, will make mindless maneuvers and mindless things he will do, and he will accost a lady walking with a bag, snatch the bag, and then get scared that she may scream and kill her. So homicide dropped because the panhandlers were taken off the road. So sometimes you make big changes by looking at small things that you can change, but that change must happen overnight. We must see that we create change, substantive but small change that is visible. It has got disproportionate input-output ratio. I have 7.5 minutes, so I will have to go quicker. Now here is Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi to me is the antidote of big data. If Mahatma Gandhi had done big data and analytics, then he would have hired McKinsey for creating a business plan for Indian independence, and then would still be actually serving the British. The man intuitively felt that apartheid is a bad thing. No data further is required. Intuitively felt that we should be a free nation. No data, no validation is required. We need to be moved by feelings, because feelings are about emotion. The word emotion has its link to Latin. E and emotion. Emotion basically means a feeling that moves you, physically moves you. It's very important to feel emotions, to feel the gut, to feel intuitive. Not always look for big data. Yesterday I was talking to a few senior entrepreneurs here, and I was asking a very fundamental question, and the reply is heartwarming. I asked, is the next generation staying here to build on what you have built so far, or are they going away? And to my pleasant surprise, he said, no, they're staying back. They're not running away to Silicon Valley anymore. They're not running away to Delhi. They're not running away someplace else. So most successful business people, second line, second generation, are wanting to stay and build the business higher. It will have disproportionate return on investment. They will go where you cannot imagine. But for that, you need to be invested in your brand, because it is the brand that they will inherit. That's all that matters. So, at the end, to deal with uncertainties, build a brand, because your brand is your reputational capital. When everything will fail, your brand will survive. And it could be the best gift that you'll give to your children. Thank you very much. All the very best.